Hi, it's Stephen at Class Act, and this is another tutorial showing you how to put together a two-page travel spread for your scrapbook. We're going to be doing some unique things with pictures by cutting them into strips, and this whole DVD is a step-by-step guide on how to move from the beginning to the end of this project.
The materials you'll need for this two-page layout are as follows. You'll need two 12 by 12 sheets of black cardstock. I'm using black soot distress cardstock. You'll need two pieces of dark green cardstock, 12 by 12. I'm using forest moss distress cardstock. And two pieces of gray beigey kind of color cardstock, and I'm using pumice stone distress cardstock. You're also going to need two 5 by 7 pictures in landscape mode. You're going to need two 4 by 6 pictures in portrait mode, and you're going to need four 4 by 6 in landscape mode. Now, one word about your pictures in your selection. Since this is primarily a travel type of layout, you're going to want pictures of places and objects. For this type of layout, pictures of people probably won't work as well, as you'll see when we get to the cutting of the pictures stage. You're also going to need two labels. This is labels 30 from Spellbinders, and I have printed across this "Enjoy the Journey," but you could use any kind of sentiment that you prefer. About 1 yard or 1 meter of gross grain ribbon in a dark color. I'm using black with white accents. Some brads, any color that you like. I'm using copper. And two of the Fad Scraps chipboard titles. One says Amazing Journey and the other says Exciting Adventure. As far as your other equipment that you're going to need is concerned, you are going to need some double-sided tape, and I use 1/2 inch and 1/4 inch. It's your preference. You may want to have a tape runner. You may want to have some wet glue that dries clear, some pop dots, and some black ink and an ink applicator. And I'm using black soot by Tim Holtz, and I'm using the Tim Holtz ink applicator, but a finger dauber or a makeup sponge will work just as well. And as I said, any kind of black ink is going to work. We're just using this to do some edging on our photo mats. Okay, so that's all you need for this project. So let's begin by creating our background. In this step, we're going to prepare our background pages for this double page spread. And what you need are the two sheets of black distress cardstock or black cardstock, whichever kind you're using. And you're going to need two pieces of dark green cardstock. Now I'm using forest moss, the distress cardstock as well. And you want to take each of these pieces of dark green cardstock and you want to cut them down to an 11.5 by 11.5. Before you lay them down onto the black piece of cardstock, you want to distress the edges using your black ink. And I'm just going to finish this one up. I've already done 3 sides of this. And you can put as much or as little on here as you like. All this does is it makes it stand out a little bit from the background. So once you have it distressed, then you're going to want to put your double-sided tape all around the perimeter on the back side. You can use wet glue for this, or you can use a tape runner, your choice. I prefer 1/2 inch double-sided tape because I find it holds the best and it doesn't dry out. And then once you've got your tape laid down, you just take off the protective coating. Now if you have fingernails, this is probably very easy. I don't have fingernails, so I like to use my paper piercer for pulling up the protective strip. And then all you're going to do is center it onto your piece of black cardstock, and this will give you a 1/4 inch border all the way around. And so there you have it. These are my 2 pages, my backgrounds for the 2 pages done. Okay, so our next step is to create the photo mats for the pictures we're not going to cut. Now we're going to create the mats and cut the pictures that we're using for this extended epic view of your shot. Now here's an example of what I have. So you can see that what I've done is I've cut the picture into even strips and I have matted them, and those spaces in between give a very interesting visual effect. And you're going to do this for the two 5x7s and the two 4x6s that you set aside. So how do you go about doing this? Well, here's the steps. So first thing you'll want to do is cut a piece of the pumice stone cardstock so that it measures 5 1/4 by 7 inches long. And then you put that aside and you're going to cut your 5x7 picture down to 5x6. So you'll want to pick the edge that you don't really want in the picture. Now in my case, I don't really need these people down here. I don't know who they are. So I'm getting rid of them. And plus there's this pole sticking up here that kind of disrupts, I think, the picture being stuck out there in the middle of the air, sort of a thing. So I'm going to take my paper trimmer and I want to cut this down to 5x6. So this is the edge I want to cut. So I'm just going to turn it over and I'm going to line it up with 6 inches and slice that chunk off. And there, I got rid of most of the people. Got a little elbow down here, but no one's going to care about that. And now this picture is the one I'm going to be cutting up and matting. So how do I cut this up? Alright, I want to cut it into 1-inch strips. So I'm just going to turn it over to the back side. And I already know it's 6 inches long. So I'm just going to move it to 5 and cut a strip. Now, as I do this, this can get a little confusing. You can get your pieces mixed up. So I'm going to take this, turn it over, and I'm just going to lay it down on the mat. I'm not sticking it down or anything yet. I'm just laying it there as a reference point. So now I'm going to move my page or my picture to 4 inches and cut that and lay that down. See, this is just keeping me straight here as to the order my strips will go in. So I just continue cutting it down, go at 3 inches, 2 inches, and then 1 inch. And so there's my strips. Now, what I want to do is I want to draw a couple of guidelines to keep these straight. Now you could go in here and, because basically we're working with it 1/8 inch of a border all the way around, I could draw lines vertically down this so I can get these each exact, but that's really not necessary because you can eyeball it and it's going to be close enough that it's not going to matter. But what I found that was helpful was to draw a line at the top and the bottom 1/8 of an inch from the top, 1/8 of an inch from the bottom. So I'm going to take out my ruler and I'm going to make a couple of guide points. So I'm going 1/8 of an inch there, 1/8 of an inch there, and you don't need to make these too heavy, just enough so you can see them. You are going to cover them up with the picture. And then I'm going to flip it around and I'm going to do the same from the bottom edge. 1/8 and 1/8. And then I'm just going to draw two very light lines, one at the top, one at the bottom, that show about will leave me with about 1/8 of an inch of a border. Okay, so I have that done. Now I can adhere my pieces. Now, keep your pieces straight. Make sure they're in the right order. And then I'm just going to use a tape runner for this. And I'm putting my adhesive on, and I'm putting it very near the edges on each strip so I don't pull up. And I'm just going to line it up. It's going to be 1/8 of an inch from the left side, my first piece. And I'm going to line up the bottom. I'm just eyeballing it. I'm lining it with the bottom edge of the picture strip with the bottom line. And then using the top as my guide. My second strip, I'm going to do the same thing, line it up with the bottom, but I'm just going to eyeball approximately 1/8 of an inch between the two. So I've got about 1/8 of an inch gap between that. Bring it up a little closer so you can see. So you see, I have 1/8 of an inch gap. And I'm just going to carry on with each of the next strips. Now, if you want to do this with wet glue, you could. Wet glue has a little bit more open time, meaning that if you don't get it quite straight or you don't like it, you can pull it back up. When you try to pull it up from double-sided tape, it may pull up the paper as well, and then you'll have to create a new mat. And I'm hoping that's not going to be my problem here. You can have wider gaps. That would be up to you, except on this particular layout, the way that I've arranged things, you're pretty tight. That's one reason why we're cutting off 1 inch of the 5x7 pictures, because otherwise they won't all fit on this page. But if you do this on future projects, you can experiment with how big a gap you want between your pictures. You can get some very interesting effects by doing that. You could also try making irregular sizes too. In other words, you don't have to have all of these straight across. This could be a different pattern altogether. Really up to you. There's many possibilities. Okay, so now you see we have this big piece left over. So we want to trim that down. So we'll take our paper trimmer and we're just eyeballing it again. You could draw a line if you want it 1/8 of an inch away if you're not comfortable with eyeballing it. And there we go. Now, one thing I noticed down here, I've got a little bit more, my measurement must have been out when I marked my 1/8 of an inch. So I'm just going to trim just a little off this bottom edge, just to kind of even it up with the top. Need a little bit more. Okay, that looks good. Okay, so now I've got these two done, and you're going to do the same procedure with the 4x6s. But with the 4x6s, you're going to cut the mat 5 1/4 inches by 6 inches, and then you're going to cut down the 4x6 picture so that you take 1 inch off of it down to 4x5. And you're going to cut each of your strips of your picture 1 inch wide, just as we did with this, and draw your lines 1/8 of an inch from the top, 1/8 of an inch from the bottom on the mat as your guides, and then you're going to lay your strips down just as we did in this one. And you're going to do that for the two 4x6s that you kept out from your set before. Okay, so that means we've got our pictures cut and our mats made. So now we're going to do some preliminary arranging so that we can lay down our ribbon. Now it's time to select our photos that we're going to be using and do some alterations to them. First thing you want to do is put aside your two 5x7 landscape mode photos, and you want to put aside 2 of your 4x6 landscape mode photos. And that's going to leave you with 4 photos, 2 in landscape mode 4x6 and 2 in portrait mode, also 4x6. Now, what you want to do with these, though, is you want to cut them down. In order to get all of these pictures, get 8 of them on a 2-page layout, we need to take these 4 pictures and reduce their size. So you want to cut your 4x6s down to 4x5. So examine your pictures and decide what edge, or in the case of the portrait ones, what part on the top or the bottom you can live without, and cut 1 inch away from that. So your 4x6 landscape photos are going to become 4x5s, and your 4x6 portrait photos are going to become 4x5s this way. Alright? Once you've done that, you can cut 4 mats for these. So your mats are going to measure 4 1/4 by 5 1/4. Once you have those cut out, Then you can mount your pictures onto each mat, leaving about 1/8 of an inch of a border all the way around. After you have them mounted, distress each edge with black soot ink using your ink applicator or whatever tool you desire for doing this. I mentioned that it could be black soot. It doesn't even have to be black soot ink. It could be any black ink you happen to have. The next step is to arrange your pictures on your layout, and this is a very precise arrangement because of the sizes of the pictures. We're trying to get 8 on a 2-page spread, and we're trying to make them fairly large. So the arrangement is very important in order to get all the other elements to fit onto the page. So what I've done is I've put one of the 5x7s down here in the bottom corner on the first page, and I'm leaving about 1/8 of an inch from the outside edges and at the bottom edge. And then I'm right above that, and only about 1/8 of an inch again, maybe to 1/4 of an inch, I'm putting one of the 4x5s that we have cut down. Over on this side, I've used one of the 4x5s, sorry, that's a 4x6, one of the 4x5s, and it's just sitting in the opposite corner. And I'm leaving 1/8 of an inch again along this edge and 1/8 of an inch down at the bottom. Similarly, at the top, I've put another one of the 4x5s, the one in landscape mode, and I'm just aligning it 1/8 of an inch from each edge. I'm doing a similar thing on this opposite page, except my 5x7's going at the top. My two 4x5s are going in these two spots, and then over here I'm putting the other 4x6 that's been cut into strips. Now you'll notice I've left a space here, a space here, a space here, and a space here. And these are important because these are the spaces where we're going to add our other embellishments. You can adhere your pictures down now before we get to the embellishment stage. It'll make it a lot easier when it comes to mounting the embellishments. And you can adhere these with whatever kind of adhesive you like. I prefer double-sided tape, as you know. I think it holds the best, but wet glue will work on this, and a tape runner, a good tape runner, will work on this as well. In this step, we're going to attach the ribbon embellishment to our page, and this consists of a piece of black gross grain ribbon, and in my case, I'm using one that has a white dashed line along the edge, and it's about 1/2 inch in width. It's up to you how wide you want to make it. It could be slightly smaller than this, and that would be fine. You're also going to need 8 brads, and 4 of them I've used already on this piece. So I'm going to attach this piece to this page, and I'm going to show you how I did that, and this is the final result here. So you will need wet glue for this, and I like this particular glue, Art Glitter Designer Dries Clear. I think it's a really good glue. It dries fairly fast, it gets tacky fairly fast, and I happen to have my bottle equipped with a little metal tip which allows me precise application. So in this space that we have here, so it looks like a Z, you're going to apply a thin line of glue from this edge down here and across here, which is what we're going to mount the ribbon on. So I'm just going to put my glue on here, and I'm just going for the center areas, and then I'm going to take my ribbon and starting over here at the edge, I'm just going to lay the ribbon down there, and I'm eyeballing it for straightness, and give it a bit of a press to make sure it gets covered well in glue. And then you're just going to kind of, for the corner, bend this over at 90 degrees. Just hold your finger on the fold and pull this part down. Now, underneath here, you can add, and I probably should have done this before I brought this down, so let me just bring this up. I'm going to put a drop of glue right here where the fold will happen. That's to hold it in place, and then fold it over, and I'm just holding my finger there. Now, depending on how much space you left on the edges of your pictures, you may find your ribbon, and if your ribbon is the width that I have picked, it may overlap slightly on the mats of your pictures, and that's not really a problem. But if that bothers you, then you may want to use a slightly narrower ribbon for this. So I'm just holding it here for a few seconds to get it to tack down, and then I'm going to do the same thing with this corner. I'm just going to put a dot of glue in there, and I'm just going to fold this over at about 90-degree angle, fold it down, and put the rest of the ribbon across my bead of glue. Smooth it down. Just hold it for a few seconds until it starts to set up. Okay, that's pretty good. Now we're not going to worry about this excess piece over here for now, but what we want to do next is punch some holes using our paper piercer to apply the brads. And I have my 4 brads right here. I'm going to put a brad at this end, one in this fold, one in this fold. That'll act as reinforcement for those folds, and one at this end. Now the best way to do this, because we're going through 2 layers of cardstock, is to put a pad underneath the paper so that you have something to pierce into. I'm actually using an art eraser for this. I find this works really well. So I'm just putting it under there, and I'm just putting a hole in, centering it, and maybe in about 1/4 of an inch from the edge of the ribbon. And inserting my brad, and I'm just spreading the pieces at the back, you know, the 2 little pieces here. Squeeze it down good, and it's in. And then I'm just going to move this over, and I'm going to punch in the center of my corner and put in my next brad. And I'll just flip this over. I think everybody's familiar with how to attach brads. You just spread the little wing parts. And we're going to go down to the next corner piece and do the same thing. Oops. My brad. Where's my hole? It's hard to see the hole black on black. There it is. Okay, spread those underneath. And my last one goes on the end, and I think I have lost my brad. I had it here a minute ago. That figures, doesn't it? Well, anyways, let me just grab another brad for my package. There it is. Found it. Okay. Paper piercer. In at this end. Okay, so I have all my brads in. Now all I need to do is trim the ribbon. And I'm just trimming it to the edge of the Forest Moss distressed paper. And there, we have it on our paper. Now the reason I picked this particular type of ribbon with the lines on the outside of it, the little white lines, kind of looked to me like a track or like a roadway or something like that. And since this is a travel album, I thought it was appropriate for this. So the next thing we want to lay down are our chipboard titles: Amazing Journey and Exciting Adventure. Now you will notice when I place these down that they do overlap a little bit on the pictures. That doesn't bother me. That gives it a little bit of dimension, I think. So I kind of like that look. But what I'm going to do to make these pop is I'm going to do a little bit of stressing. But before then, I'll show you something that isn't included on here. Here's what they look like in the package. They have a chipboard frame all the way around them. What I did in this case is I just took my scissors and snipped the little joining points off so that the border comes off. Now you can save that border for another layout somewhere down the road. If you wanted to put it on with the border, you could. It's just going to overlap a little bit more on your pictures, which I don't think that's a bad look either, but I'm not going to do that. But what I am going to do is I'm going to distress these elements. So I'm getting out my black soot distress ink, and again, any ink will do. And I'm just applying it to the edge of all the letters. And again, what this will do is, because this chipboard is kind of plain in color, it's going to make it pop, the words pop a little bit more. Now, if you wanted to, you could go over all the letters in distress ink. I'm not going to, because I kind of like that color, because I think it blends in with the paper very well. So I'm going to do the same thing with the second title piece. I really love these little fab scrap chipboard titles for pages because my handwriting isn't that good, and although I'll do a lot of titles on a computer, I really like these ready-made because there's so many fonts and they're very clear. And I'm going to lay that one down there. Okay, so I have them all inked up, and now all I have to do is attach them. Now this is up to you. You could attach them with little tiny pop dots and make them pop up a little bit more, but this ribbon underneath is thick enough that it gives it a little bit of a raised look already. And I know some people don't like a lot of raised elements because they're going to put their pages into page protectors, and that makes their albums a little bulky. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my glue again, and this is where the little metal tip on the end comes in really handy. Oops, don't pull it off. Leave it on, and you just can outline the letters, and this gets a good amount of glue on. Get it started here, but you see how fine it comes out, and I'm just tracing the letters. And because it dries clear, if I get any on squeezing out from the sides of it or whatever, it's not going to be a problem because it'll dry clear. I'll just line this up. Press it down, hold it for a few seconds just to give it a time to set up. Okay, and now we'll do the second piece. Okay. Also, by using glue, it gives you a little open time so that you can reposition it, get it straight. Just hold that down until that's set up. Okay, so I'm almost finished here. The last element that you have in your package are two labels. These come from Spellbinder's dies, Labels 30, and I just cut these two out, and then I stamped on it my sentiment. And in this case, I'm calling it Enjoy the Journey, and I did the same on both of these. And these are going to go one up here and one down here. Now, if you want, though, you don't have to have Enjoy the Journey on it. You could stamp whatever you want on it. In fact, you could leave one of these blank and turn it into a small journaling card for your layout as well. It's up to you. So what I'm going to do, though, is before I tack this down, I'm going to, again, use my distress ink, and I'm going to go all around the edges of each of these. Again, as you've heard me say so many times before, this just makes these stand out a little bit more from your background, makes them pop. And you can Put as much or as little on as you desire. Okay. Now again, before I adhere them, I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to take my paper piercer again, and I'm going to get out some brads. I'm going to get out 4 brads. That's more than 4, but that will do. And I'm going to punch a hole at the end of each of the label. Put this up here where you can see it. Okay, so I'm going to put one here at the E and one here at the J. And I'm using my paper piercer again. Hole 1. Hole 2. And the only reason I'm doing this is I'm not going to use these to hold this piece onto the double page spread. I'm just using it for an embellishment effect. Now, be careful when you bend over the little wings because you don't want them to appear, so you want to put them in such a way that they're going to be hidden by the label. Okay, that one's done. And we're going to do the same to the second one. If you don't have a paper piercer, you can use a push pin. That'll work just as well. Oops, that one's peeking around the edge. It didn't get quite in there. There we go. Okay. Now, to adhere these to our layout, let's move a few things out of our way. I'm simply going to use some pop dots to pop them up. And I think I'm going to use large ones for this. Any size will work that you happen to have. No, I may not be using large ones because I think I'm... Oh, yes, I have large ones. There we go. Now, I like to put on something this size 4. Oops, let's get this in the shot so you can see what I'm doing. So it gives it good support and holds it down pretty well. Now again, because I don't have fingernails, I find my paper piercer is a very handy tool for getting off these little protective strips, just like I did with the double-sided tape. And one other trick. These little squares sometimes don't have as much sticky on them as you'd like. So to make sure they don't drop off, I add a little dot of glue right in the center of each square. And then I'm going to mount it right here in the center. Again, it may overlap my picture a little bit. That's okay. I'm not concerned about that. So there's one. And I'm going to do the same thing on the second one. That one little prong there is bothering me. It's hanging a little close to the edge. I'm just going to bend this over. Okay, there we go. And this is the last thing we're doing to this page. Now if you want to add a little bit of bling, in fact I am going to add a little bling to this, and so after I get this down, there we go, I'm going to add a little shine to this. I'll be right back to show you how to do that. For our last finishing touch, we're going to use Wink of Stella. If you're not familiar with Wink of Stella, what it is, it adds shimmer very lightly to any object you paint on. This is like a water brush on the end, and the shimmer solution is inside the barrel. And when you first get it, it'll come like this. You pull the cap off, you untwist this end because there's a black ring here. Take the black ring away and discard it, and then screw this back on, and then you need to prime it. You give it a little pump with your fingers, you squeeze on it, and just take a piece of scrap paper just using a sticky note, and go back and forth and keep pumping it a little bit until you start to see some of the shimmer material come out of it. Don't know if you can see that on the paper. And what I like about these is it doesn't add any color, but it does add a little bit of shimmer, and it's not heavy. So I'm going to go just all over the chipboard pieces with this. And I'm not really coating them from end to end. I'm just kind of brushing it on. And I just like the subtle glittery effect that the Wink of Stella brush gives my letters. Just another small element to make it pop out. Don't know if the camera's picking up that look, but from where I'm standing, that's kind of finishing off this piece very nicely. So I'll just get the second piece. If you find that your brush starts to dry out a little, just give it a gentle squeeze. That usually gets more of the shimmer solution flowing. Now you might pick up a little bit of your distress ink, because distress ink on the edges of this is a water-soluble product, so as soon as it hits moisture it reactivates. But I'm not worried about that. It's just maybe adding a little bit of darkening to each of the letters, and that's okay. It's giving it that more of that distressed kind of vintage look, and I think that suits the style of this particular page. We're just about done. I'm just going over a few spots that I may have missed. Okay, so that's it. Our layout is done. Let's take a little closer look so you can see, and I see if you can get this. See if you can get the shimmer. Get a little shimmer off the pictures, but that's not because I added anything to them. That's just the nature of the pictures. But there we have page 1 and page 2. And I think it's very dynamic. I think just cutting those pictures into strips works very well. As I mentioned earlier in the tutorial, you could actually cut these strips in your regular lengths, and that would give a really neat look as well, or on angles. So feel free to experiment with this kind of approach to displaying your pictures. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope to see you at another one of my workshops. Bye for now.